At 81, Leona Williams has broken her silence. For decades she was seen only in Merle Haggard's shadow, her voice blending into his, her words mistaken for his confessions. The industry crowned him the outlaw poet of country music, but many of the lines that fans still cling to were her own. She lived through the turbulence, the erasure, the heartbreak, and she survived it all. Now she's finally telling the truth about what really happened on those stages, in those songs, and in that marriage that nearly cost her everything. What fans thought was his story was in fact hers. By the mid-1970s, Leona Williams wasn't a naive newcomer chasing fame. She had already proven herself as a songwriter with an edge and a harmony singer whose presence elevated every track she touched. She was practical, sharp, and disciplined, the kind of artist who always arrived prepared and never wasted a studio's time. In an industry that often dismissed women as decoration, she had carved out respect by sheer grit. Backstage in 1975, her path collided with Merle Haggard's. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, the kind of restless noise only a touring band could generate. Merle was already a legend. His name stitched into honky-tonks from Bakersfield to Biloxi. Mama Tried and Okie from Muskogee had made him a household name, the outlaw poet who gave voice to working-class America. Most people shrank in his presence. Leona didn't. She studied him with the same unflinching clarity she gave her own lyrics. Their first conversation was not about stardom. It was about music. He told her her songs carried more weight than most men's. She laughed, saying most men couldn't handle the truth. That spark caught fire instantly. Within days she was invited to join his tour, to sing harmonies, maybe open a few shows. It wasn't a gift, it was a test. From her first night on stage, she silenced every skeptic. The band Hardened Roadmen had doubted her, but her harmonies weren't ornamental, they were steel, weaving into Merle's rough edges and sharpening them into something unforgettable. Audiences leaned in. Critics noticed the new electricity in his shows. It wasn't just chemistry, it was confession. Together they sounded like two people peeling back their own layers in real time. To the crowd it looked like perfect harmony, but to Leona, it was the beginning of a storm. Touring with Merle only magnified what was already clear. Leona Williams was more than a harmony singer. She was the writer who could give Merle Haggard the words he could not find for himself. "You Take Me for Granted" didn't come from his imagination. It came from hers. From bruises pressed into melody, from nights spent wondering how long a woman could be overlooked before she broke. "Someday When Things Are Good" carried the same sting, born not from his struggles but from her own moments of doubt and private sorrow. Yet when those songs reached the audience, they were absorbed into Merle's mythology. Critics praised his brutal honesty. Fans said he had never sounded more raw, more human. Interviewers asked him what inspired those lyrics, and he offered answers without correcting the record. To the outside world, they were his confessions. To Leona, they were her diary pages set to music. At first, she accepted it. The songs were alive, moving people, and that mattered. But the erasure cut deeper each time she heard her words celebrated as his. The applause grew thunderous, but the silence around her name was louder still. By 1978, the professional partnership had become personal. They married quietly, away from cameras and headlines. There was no Nashville spread, no grand announcement, just two artists who believed they could build something real out of the fire they shared on stage. Leona didn't wear white. She didn't want illusion. She wanted truth, in the music and in the man. But truth was never simple with Merle. He carried shadows, old wounds, restlessness, silences that swallowed whole rooms. She admired his artistry, but she was already learning that the brilliance came with a cost. Her words filled jukeboxes, but his name filled the credits. And every cheer reminded her how far she was slipping into the background. Marriage to Merle Haggard was not a door opening. It was a door closing. The industry that had once begun to recognize her suddenly reframed her entirely. She was no longer introduced as Leona Williams, songwriter and singer. She was introduced as Mrs. Merle Haggard. That shift came quickly. Promoters funneled offers through him, asking if he would be comfortable with her performing alone. Producers softened her edges, insisting she sing lighter, sweeter, safer. Her sharp, honest lyrics were waved off as too raw for female voices. The truth she carried was considered unmarketable. If she spoke up, whispers spread. She was difficult, ungrateful, ungracious. Even her own songs slipped further from her hands. When she wrote a hit, interviewers credited Merle. When she tried to correct them, she was met with rolled eyes or brushed-off laughs. Her identity as a songwriter, the one thing she had built through grit and instinct, was being erased in real time. And behind the curtain, the pattern repeated. Merle was captivating in public, tender in rare moments, but also unpredictable, absent, wounded. He lived in extremes, charm one day, silence the next. Fans saw devotion in the way they performed together. She felt her own identity dissolving, one applause at a time. She had written, "You take me for granted." But sadly now she was living it, night after night. Touring with Merle was both intoxicating and destructive. The stages were packed, the applause deafening, but the life behind the curtain was brutal. Smoky motels, endless bus rides, sound checks that spiraled into arguments. Every day carried both glory and exhaustion. Merle's demons were constant companions. He disappeared often, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. He returned with new songs, new lines, new apologies, and expected Leona to fold seamlessly back into harmony. She did, because that was the unspoken rule of women in country music at the time: keep the show alive, keep the man steady, keep the illusion intact. To the public, they were royalty, the outlaw poet and the angel at his side. But for Leona, the cost was steep. She bore his storms in silence, carried his absences without complaint, and lived with the weight of being the stabilizer in a world that had no interest in stabilizing her. And yet, she loved him. Not the legend, not the fame, but the flickers of the man beneath the brief moments when his walls dropped, when he looked at her like she was the only thing holding him together. Those moments kept her tethered far longer than she should have stayed. But they were rare, and they were never enough. The irony was brutal. The very songs she had written, songs about being overlooked, about endurance, about heartbreak, had become the soundtrack of her marriage. Each performance was both confession and punishment. She heard her own truths roar back from thousands of voices, but her name was nowhere to be found. To the audience it was magic, but to her it was survival. The unraveling of Leona's marriage to Merle wasn't loud. It didn't erupt in a fight that made headlines. It came in the smallest, quietest moment, and that was what made it final. It happened in a Tulsa dressing room. Leona handed Merle a new song she had written the night before, her heart still pounding from another sleepless fight. The lyrics were raw, written straight from her ribs. She stood there waiting, hoping that for once he would see the weight behind her words. He glanced at the page, nodded absently, and set it down as if it were a receipt. Then he walked out. That silence cut deeper than any argument. For years she had compromised, softened herself, swallowed her own truth to keep harmony alive. In that instant, she knew the man wasn't going to change, and if she stayed, she would vanish. Leaving wasn't dramatic. She didn't call a press conference or storm out with accusations. She began quietly packing her things, one suitcase at a time, carrying her notebooks and guitar out of the world that had consumed her. When the divorce was finalized in 1983, it passed almost unnoticed. No splashy headlines, no tabloid frenzy, just a void where her name had once stood. The industry's reaction was swift but cruelly subtle. Without Merle's name attached, Leona's calls went unanswered. Radio DJs still introduced her as Merle Haggard's ex. Critics reduced her to a footnote. The woman who had given the outlaw poet some of his most unforgettable words was treated as if she had never existed. For years, she had been told to keep the harmony. After having enough, walking away was the first time she chose her own melody. The silence after divorce was brutal, but Leona refused to vanish. She still had her pen, her voice, her truth, and she wasn't going to bury them. She began recording again, this time on her own terms. Independent albums like Yes Ma'am, He Found Me in a Honky Tonk carried the grit and honesty that Nashville executives had once told her to hide. These weren't songs crafted to flatter the industry. They were songs that reflected her scars, her survival, her independence. They didn't climb the charts, but they cut deep. Her tours looked different now. The grand arenas and massive productions were replaced by county fairs, American Legion halls, and small-town theaters where the lights flickered and the speakers sometimes crackled. But those shows carried something the big ones often lacked: truth. The fans who showed up weren't there because of Merle's legend. They were there for Leona. Night after night, people handed her vinyls from decades past, asked about the songs she had written that never made it to radio, and told her how her words had saved them. One woman told her that "You Take Me for Granted" had given her the strength to leave an abusive marriage. A man admitted he had played "Someday When Things Are Good" on repeat after his mother died. Those stories mattered more than any award. But the road wasn't easy. There were nights she sat in motel rooms wondering if it was worth it, if she had the strength to keep going. Once, she even drove back to Missouri, pulled up at her family's old farm gate, and considered walking away for good. But she didn't, because deep down she knew she wasn't finished. The melodies still came, the words still burned, and silence wasn't going to win. Occasionally, she and Merle reunited for a song or two. The chemistry lingered, something that could never fully die. But the trust was gone. Their smiles looked like apologies. Their duets sounded like echoes of a love that had already collapsed. Leona knew better than to mistake nostalgia for forgiveness. She had once written songs to save him, but now every lyric she sang was to save herself. As the years rolled on, something unexpected began to happen. Slowly, quietly, her influence resurfaced. Younger women in country began naming her as an inspiration. They cited her sharp honesty, her refusal to soften her truth, and her endurance as proof that women could survive an industry that often wanted them silent. Songwriters began to trace lines from her lyrics to their own, acknowledging that her fingerprints were woven into country music even if her name hadn't been. Tribute shows emerged. Reissues brought her forgotten songs back into circulation. Documentary crews reached out, this time asking about her words, not just her marriage. For decades, she had been framed as Merle Haggard's wife. Now she was finally being recognized as the songwriter who gave his catalog some of its most haunting depth. Leona didn't speak with bitterness. She didn't need to. She spoke with clarity. She told the truth about writing songs that were misattributed, about watching interviewers skip her name, about handing over lyrics that the world later assumed were Merle's. She told how she had been asked to soften, to smile more, to tone it down, and how she had refused even when it cost her everything. By her 70s, and now into her 80s, she no longer chased awards or comebacks. She didn't need to. She sang when she wanted, wrote when she had something to say, and mentored younger artists backstage. To them she said what she wished someone had told her. Don't shrink. Don't hand away your truth for applause that won't last. When asked if she regretted her years with Merle, she gave the same answer every time. She loved him. She loved the music they made. But leaving wasn't regret. It was survival. It gave her back her name, her voice, her autonomy. For decades, she was cast as Harmony. At 81, she is finally heard as the Melody. Leona Williams' story isn't one of tragedy. It's one of endurance. She endured erasure, heartbreak, and silence, but she never surrendered her voice. When Merle Haggard passed away in 2016, Leona grieved. But she did not lose herself in that grief. Because long before she was his partner, his muse, his wife, she was a songwriter with something to say. And at 81 she still is. Her legacy isn't measured in trophies or headlines. It's measured in resonance. It's in the fans who still thank her for writing the words that carried them through heartbreak. It's in the younger women who pick up guitars because they heard her records. It's in the songwriters who whisper her name as influence, knowing that her voice still echoes in the genre even if it was once silenced. For too long, her music carried someone else's name. Today, it carries only hers. And it sounds like freedom. She is no longer the woman behind Merle Haggard. She is Leona Williams, the survivor, the songwriter, the voice who refused to fade.